And what is up? And welcome to the DLF YouTube channel, dynastyleaguefootball.com. This is what we're brought to you by. That's their premium source for Dynasty League content. Make sure you go check out the website and become a premium subscriber. It's definitely worth doing. I am here today, as we've been doing for all teams. This is number 27 on the list, the Seattle Seahawks. We are talking about every single team in the NFL and breaking them down with some really smart football people, which we have here today. And they're going to help us break down the Seahawks, who they're a fan of. And they, Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson, who's going to lead this team in carries? We think we know. Do we? Who's going to lead this team in targets? That might be a tougher question. But we're going to break all that down right after this. I'm excited to be joined by some really smart people, like I said, who are Seahawks fans. They're part of the 12s. Right here to my left, I'll start by introducing you to the king of podcasts. He is just kind of the godfather of so many different podcasts. He's got DLF. He's the podcast director for that. The AP Network, the DAP Network. That's the Trade Addicts Pod, DGN Pod, Dynasty Game Night, all that good stuff. Russ, how are you today?
Oh, I'm great, man. Like, you come in like right away with energy, and it's just like, yeah, let's podcast, man. Let's do this.
That's right. Yeah. And also bringing the energy down below here, we got Scott at Munder Difflin FF. He's part of the IBT group down there, writer, social media guy, podcast guy. Scott, how are you?
I'm great. Cal, thanks for inviting me on. My wife and daughters just left to visit one of her friends until Friday.
Very
so
cool.
I have a house to myself, which is extremely rare for me.
Yep.
So I'm probably going to spend a lot of it on Twitter, but whatever.
So nothing different. That's cool.
Yeah, nothing different. Just
yeah.
No eye rolls or skeptical glances. Just freedom.
Yeah, I had been off Twitter for a while, and then I put out a tweet today. Like, I'd been off for a while, and then I come back and like Brian Edwards is like what Randy Moss and Terrell Owens' baby would be like, basically. And like, all right, I haven't missed much. We're still doing the same thing over there.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Dog days of August.
Yeah. Well, Scott, let's start with you, and we'll talk about some of the camp battles, storylines, things like that are going down in Seattle right now. There's a lot of hype. Russ, you talk about bringing the energy. Pete Carroll still brings the energy, and Russell Wilson does. And it seems like every time I listen to them talk, I'm hyped about a brand new player. Scott, who are you focused on, or what are you paying attention to going on in camp right now?
I'm not nervous yet, but I'm an Dwayne Eskridge guy. I really like Dwayne Eskridge. When the pick was first made, because it was bizarre waiting that long it was just bizarre for the Seahawks to only have a few picks. It was a weird draft in that respect. But they picked him, and my first reaction was kind of like, what? Who? But the more I've looked into it, the more I see there's a definite role available to him right away on this team, which he's not getting near the hype some of the other rookies are getting, wide receivers, and rightly so. I mean, small school, shorter, smaller guy. But he might have a clearer path to relevancy than some of the people being thought of higher than him. He's basically, if you look at size, speed, he's almost a carbon copy of Doug Baldwin. Another the best slot receiver the Seahawks have ever had. 5'10-ish, just under 200 pounds. Eskridge is a little bit faster. Baldwin surprisingly was more athletic as far as some of those metrics go, even though he went undrafted. But that's kind of what I see. And Doug Baldwin's one of my all-time favorite NFL players. Just him coming in as an undrafted guy, all his social awareness stuff, he's great. So Eskridge is a guy, not necessarily a camp battle. I don't know if he really has that much competition for that third wide receiver. I'm just looking at that foot that he's currently on the PUP list, the preseason PUP list. So he can obviously be activated from that anytime. But I'm excited. They haven't had that middle of the field, shorter area field guy to rely on in a while, which is part what made their offense so predictable last year. That and Schottenheimer not being the most creative of people. Um, Other than that, I'm very curious to see what happens at linebacker. I mean, Bobby Wagner is Bobby Wagner. He's going to be right there in the middle where he always is. KJ Wright, as of now, up in the air. He might come back, but I'm very excited about Jordan Brooks. I was excited about that pick. That was a very Seahawks pick. Picking a linebacker when they didn't really need one, athletic, it was a very Seahawks pick. But I'm excited to see what he can do, and just how they're gonna address this linebacker and defensive line rotation. Because as diehard Seahawks fan know, the key to their success in the early teens was those snap percentages for those D linemen not being anywhere near 100%. A constant cycle, keeping people fresh back in the Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill days. So I'm hoping, from all I've read, I don't know the most about defensive players, but from what I've been seeing from some of the beat reporters, Corbin Smith, I follow him on Twitter. I read a lot of his stuff. Their depth at that D line is as good as it's been in a little while. So, yeah.
No,
those
that's
are the
great.
things I've been looking at.
Yeah, Russ, I want to go. Let's go back to Dwayne Eskridge and talk about him just a little bit. Toe injury keeping him on the PUP list, as we said, but he's a guy that right now is going off in the as number 25, so the wide receiver 13 in rookie drafts right now. Do you think that's a fair price for him?
Yeah, I mean, let's break it down. It's funny because the little thing on the bottom of our screen says what storylines are camp battles. Like, I kind of giggled. I'm like, is there a camp battle anywhere on the Seahawks? Like, I think we have. Will Disley and Gerald Everett is probably the closest thing we have, and honestly, you just sort of shrug your shoulders at that one.
Sure.
But the storylines that I don't even know if we're not going to get an answer in training camp is, are they going to allow this new offensive coordinator, who is a passing offensive coordinator, let the team pass the ball? If that happens, if they come in and allow that team to open, let Russ cook his dead. Just let that go away at this point, because they're not going to. But will it be more than 50-50? Please. And if that is the case, there's absolutely a role for Dwayne Eskridge. He's not going to be a fantasy wide receiver too, at least year one. Just especially with, Lockett's like 28. He's aging out a little bit. Give him 2 years. Maybe he walks into that second wide receiver role, because DK is going to live forever. That man is not human. So I think all of it comes down to the amount of passing they let this team do, because Russ is very good at playing quarterback. That's not a secret. We all know that. So if they let him throw the ball, and these guys are close to decent at getting open, he will get them the ball. And they are going to be 3 very good wide receivers with a pretty tight end. And the thing I like is the 3 wide receivers are all different. They all will fit into a role. And every once in a while, you can just switch up what you did with Lockett and DK. But, Eskridge in the middle, playing that Doug Baldwin. I completely agree with every word you said about Doug Baldwin. He was so much fun to watch. Like that Steve Smith fire, he had that. He was taller than 5'6", so it wasn't exactly the same. But he had that chip on his shoulder that made him so much fun to watch. And while I don't know Eskridge enough to know if he has that role hasn't been filled since Baldwin left. So I'm ready for it to come back.
I had a brief conversation with Matt Waldman, who was really high on Dwayne Eskridge and had a lot of good things to say about this passing game. And I think you touched on that with the up tempo. Is it going to be up tempo? Is there going to be a lot of passing? And it just depends on how much you believe the quotes that are coming out of camp, right? Because I read Russell Wilson saying it was going to be an up tempo offense under the new offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, who you mentioned. He said that Russell Wilson has been super collaborative with Waldron, whatever that means, and that it's time to throw some more. So, does that mean that ultimately they're going to, take the training wheels off of Russ and what is he, 32, 33 now? Like, it's about time, right? So, Scott, what do you think about that? Like, are you hearing anything, the same things? Like, how much are you inclined to believe what they're saying about the passing going up? Like, where do you think this ultimately goes?
The homer in me believes probably a little too much what comes out. But I do think that it's not going to be what it was the first part of last season. just like with Dak Prescott, it's not going to be like that the first part of this season either. That was a combination of just historically bad defense and just a ton of passing. So it's not going to be on that level where Russell was just like, the only pick he threw in the first bit of the season was a drop pass by Greg Olsen that got returned for a pick six. That was it. So I don't think it's going to be like that, but I do think, Shane Waldron, it's a little bit hard to gauge because he wasn't the OC in LA. He was the passing games coordinator. So it's hard to I don't really know enough to be like, well, what was his impact on the run game there? All I know is that the offenses in LA the past few years have been very balanced. They haven't been heavy either way, and they've been, upper half of the league in both categories. So they weren't really good at passing, terrible at running. Again, I don't know how much Waldron had to do with any of the running, but I do think I think he was brought in for a reason. I think that a big knock on Schottenheimer was just his predictability. Run, vertical pass, run, vertical pass. And then, eventually DK is not going to win some of those battles, or it's just there's not a big margin for error with that system, especially when in the NFL when defenses are smart and they catch on and they adjust. So I think that there's going to be more creativity. I have heard there's going to be more quick passes, more quick slants, more quick outs, stuff like that, which I am all for. I've talked about this with other Seahawks fans. One of the most aggravating and frustrating things watching the Seahawks play is the fact that they don't really do those quick passes. Russell holds the ball quite a bit. And then you combine that with the fact that they play that bend, don't break defense, and all the other teams are quick passing us to death. So the combination of that makes watching it so frustrating because it's like, why don't we just do that? Just do that. But, so I'm all for it. I think it's possible, I'm not smart enough to know why, there's a lot of factors as to why they didn't just do that. Obviously, if something works, they're going to do it. Maybe they didn't have the personnel for it. Maybe Eskridge helps with that. But I do think it's going to look different. I think there's going to probably be some plays that are a little unfamiliar for Seahawks fans with the up tempo and the quickness, because the Seahawks go up tempo, and we've seen them go up tempo, and they have a lot of success with it, but not maybe in the middle of the first quarter like we might see this season. So I hope it's true. You've also had the coach speak. Pete Carroll said earlier in the offseason something about running the ball more, just like every year. But I think it'll be well balanced. I think that's going to be the goal. So let Russ cook on whatever. I just think they should, not let Russ turn into 60 passes a game, but not limit him to 25 attempts a game either.
And Russ, I'm going to hammer this a little bit because this is the story for this team, I think. We kind of forget about the offseason where it's like the story of Aaron Rodgers wanting to go somewhere like that never left. The one with Russell Wilson, they handled that in-house, and it seemed like that largely went away. And so I don't know if it was they came to an agreement and there's, they are going to have Russ be a little bit more collaborative in what they do. And it does sound like, so if I'm telling the narrative where what we're hearing from Russ, what we're hearing from, from the team, even like Chris Carson talking about running backs lining up wide and having a chance to run routes and catch the ball out of the backfield and things like that. So if that does ultimately, if I'm willing to believe that is going to happen, could that make Russell Wilson like a genuine sleeper? Like right now, like does seem like he's going off the board later than you typically would. And if he's going to have those kind of weapons and be allowed to throw the ball more, like he could be in for an MVP type season, right?
Well, see, here's the thing. We are used to the first 6 games being Russ cooking. When we hit week 10, then I'll get on board. Everyone's probably gonna go nuts when he gets like 35 pass attempts, and he's insanely efficient. He always has been. He's very good, so he's gonna be doing really well. And I'm sure everyone's gonna buy in. And I'm just, nope, not yet. Week 12 is gonna hit. If they're still doing it, I'm all in. But until they go to finish the season still passing the ball, I'm not buying it, because we've seen that for the past, I don't know, how long has Russell Wilson been playing? Like 1993? Like it's been the same way ever since. It's just, let's do this. Really good. Whoa, it's getting cold out. Let's run the ball a lot. We don't, it's every year. It's just insanely frustrating.
Yeah, that's why I like to do these, because like you got a lot of experience with the team, and you kind of that's good. I like to be able to listen to that and say like, okay, maybe I'll hold off on getting too excited. So either way, whether they're throwing a lot or whether they're throwing a little, Scott, let me start with you. Who do you think? Obviously, there's two major candidates here. Who's going to lead this team in targets?
I mean, I don't want to get too cute with this one. I think it's going to be DK Metcalf. I mean, I'm doing projections for the first time, and I have Metcalf and Tyler close. I mean, there's a select group of wide receiver duos out there where, I mean, their targets, Godwin, Evans, that sort of thing. But I still think DK goes nuts this year. To be perfectly honest, I think he probably learned a little bit last year. There was that ridiculous, embarrassing dropping the ball before he was in the end zone. He had a few key drops and fumbles, but he's still super young, and he's just nobody that big should be able to run that fast. It's just not fair. I mean, it's just not fair. So I see him just dominating this year, especially if they have that third option in Eskridge to kind of, so they can't just cherry pick the deep ball. So I think it's going to be DK.
Russ, Lockett had 132 targets last year. DK had 129, so real close. Do you think it's close, or do you think DK just way overtakes him now?
Wait, first I want to ask, you said you're not going to get cute, so you're going to say, if you were going to get cute, who are you going to say?
It's a good point. I mean, if they're that close, Colby Parkinson, maybe. No.
Nice. Dude, I have a couple of rookie autos from him. Let's do it.
I've got my eye on Colby too. He got hurt last year, but he's been impressing in camp, just like every player in the NFL.
Right.
Oh yeah, best shape of his life.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh no, it's gonna be everything. Oh yeah. Like it was really weird to see the Seahawks do something so insanely smart about a passing game, because they've never done anything insanely smart about a passing game before. But I wish I can give credit where credit was due, but I have no idea who tweeted this out. But it was a video of his route tree throughout the season, of DK Metcalf's route tree. And it's like straight line, curved in a little bit, curved in a little bit. And as the season went on, it got more and more complex. It was like, good for them, yes, because that was the knock on DK coming in, that he can't run routes, he has no agility, and apparently just easing him in, that's what they needed. And because he was, by the end of the season, was great. Is he going to be Devontae Adams? I mean, probably not. That big body dude who is fast and that good of a route runner.
Yeah,
but need to be. At least for like the next 5-6 years when he's still bigger and faster than everyone. Absolutely. And yeah, this year. I think, assuming they do take on a more traditional offense that is a whole lot less boring than run, pass, I think they'll use DK as the X, and he'll get treated like it, and he'll get the most targets.
So there's been a lot of praise for Gerald Everett, and you guys did a great job breaking down the wide receivers. So let's touch on the tight ends. You got Will Dissly, you got Gerald Everett. A lot of praise for Gerald Everett, I think, in the fantasy community, but also there's been some from Pete Carroll and from Russ Wilson too. And it does seem like Russ likes tight ends. Now Dissly's gotten hurt a bunch, and Greg Olsen wasn't exactly the right guy, but it seems like when he's got a guy that's playing tight end, that's cooking a little bit, like he seems like he likes feeding him. Is that just something that I've picked up anecdotally, or do you guys see that too, Scott?
It's hard to tell with the Seahawks and tight ends, honestly. I mean, I've never recovered from the trade for Jimmy Graham. So I mean,
there you go.
Mentally, it's hard for me to get on board. I miss the days of Zach Miller, but I mean, Gerald Everett. One thing I will say about him, it's been hard to tell because he's been sharing the field with Higbee, and there's been all this talk about the splits, when they play, when they don't. It's like, okay. I mean, the positives obviously is he knows Shane Waldron. He knows his system because he was just there. Some of the, burst score, speed score, all that stuff, those type of metrics, he is in the top percentile pretty much across the board athletically, which, I just don't know how many targets and how they're going to move both of the tight ends around. Because Will Dissly, I mean, I feel so bad for the guy because he was, especially his first year. I mean, he, a couple multi-touchdown games and then he gets hurt. And then last year, same thing. But I mean, they've got a sneaky solid tight end room right now. And with Everett, I just don't know. I don't know how many targets he's going to get. I mean, I know what I've seen is that Waldron likes to run that 11 personnel with one tight end, 3 wide receivers. So are they just going to be, is Everett just going to be the go guy? I mean, on, our lads depth chart right now, I mean, to take it for what it is, it's a depth chart online. they have Disley, Parkinson, Everett at number 3. So it's just it's a little unpredictable right now. I like Gerald Everett. He's definitely shown flashes, relative to tight ends with the Rams. So I think if they find a good way to use him, I think he could be a big part of the offense.
Russ, like 6 to 8 targets a game, something like that could make him fantasy relevant depending on where he's used. Do you think that could be something you could see for Gerald Everett?
Well, I think he's going to be in that mess of tight ends you never really feel good about starting. The Seahawks use for a tight end, 3rd and short in end zone. That's all it ever is. And that's why we still hate the idea of Jimmy Graham was on the team, because I remember seeing that happen and flipping out, being like, let's go. Yes, all we need is a tight end. Let's do it.
How are they going to stop us now?
And then they just didn't pass him the ball. It was infuriating. But and the same thing happens. You get Greg Olsen. Luke Wilson looks good for 30 seconds. Will Disley looks good for 30 seconds, and it's all on third down and in the end zone. That's the only time they use tight ends. I like the idea of Gerald Everett. I like the idea of Gerald Everett in an offense he kind of knows. No, I'm not buying it. It's like one of those, the Green Bay tight ends. We had like a good decade of just knowing that it was meh until Robert Tonyan ruined it all. But still, Seattle tight end, I'm just never going to buy into it. Even if he has a good season, I'm just going to sit here calling it a fluke. Even if it happens 4 years in a row. Nope, just a fluke. Just a fluke.
You got a good jersey on right there, Scott. So let's talk about the rushing attempts. Let's go over to that side of the game. That is Sean Alexander, right? Am I?
No, Cam Chancellor.
Oh, I couldn't.
I was about to say that ain't no DJ Dallas jersey.
Okay. No, Cam. Bam, Cam.
Let's talk about the rushing attempts because I'm sorry.
No, go. I was just saying I miss Cam Chancellor. That's
Me too.
Oh, I think this is one of those things where it's like, okay, if you don't buy into this team throwing more, then we're not valuing Chris Carson enough either. So, Scott, what do you think? Is Chris Carson going to be the guy, or is Rashad Penny finally going to take his rightful place as the heir apparent here?
No, it's Chris Carson. It's Chris Carson's backfield. It won't be like a Derrick Henry situation as far as that much of an opportunity share for Carson. Penny will get some play. Dallas will get some play. Hell, even Alex Collins might get some play. Travis Homer. They've got a pretty deep backfield, but Chris Carson, I don't think he gets enough love. He gets hurt every now and then he's just, he's injury prone. He's hurt all the time. It's like, well, not really. And his per game averages, he's a solid NFL running back. He's yet another one. That's the thing about the Seahawks I do love is you can go down the list of all these players that are great, and I love the way Carson plays, for better or for worse, just running people over. But he was a 7th round draft pick. He was very close to being the last pick in that draft. Doug Baldwin was undrafted. Chancellor was a 5th round pick. It's like they've been able to find that. But with Carson, no, I think as long as he stays healthy, I think he's the majority ball carrier. He's an underrated pass catcher out of the backfield. And I am curious to see how involved Penny gets. I haven't given up on Penny yet. I've given up on him being a 1st round bell cow back for the Seahawks. But he's just been hurt. The games he's played, he's done fine. So I'm curious to see if he's able to stay healthy. If there hasn't been too much detrimental effects from his injuries to his athleticism and speed, then I'm really curious to see what he can do if he's on the field. But it's Chris Carson's backfield.
Yeah, and obviously, I think he's the obvious answer here to the leading the team in rushing attempts. But could we see him more utilized in the passing game? As he kind of alluded to the fact that in Shane Waldron's offense, he's going to be able to line up wide a little bit more and run more routes. 37 receptions in 12 games last year. Does he have like some sneaky receiving upside, Russ?
He always did. The biggest reason that Chris Carson never became a thing in fantasy is because of low draft capital, and he misses a few games every season. It's just the unfortunate truth. But so did Gronk. Let's throw that out there. Of course, I'm not comparing the level of running back Chris Carson is to the level of tight end Gronk was. Not saying that, but it's like George Kittle, George Kittle, one of the best. But it gets baked into their price, and that's why Chris Carson is so great to have on any competing team, because you barely have to pay anything for him. But when he's healthy, and you will know when he's healthy, he's going to score you points, and that's awesome. I mean, up until now, the Seahawks, like the only thing they ever did with the passing game and running backs is wheel routes, and a couple of screens that always broke down anyway because their offensive line was atrocious. So I would love to see a little creativity. It would be strange of them to put Chris Carson out wide instead of DJ Dallas, who is a receiving back, by skill set. But it makes more sense to keep Carson on the field, put him out in motion because maybe they'll think they're actually running the ball with him out there. It'd be cool. I'd love to see it happen. Will I have faith in it? I don't know. I haven't seen what kind of actual route runner Chris Carson is, but I love the idea of it.
Yeah. What about we could say a sleeper, we can maybe say undervalued. Let's look at a little bit of their ADPs and talk about some of these guys that might be undervalued. So we've talked already, for instance, about Gerald Everett. He's going off the board as the tight end 22. We talked about Eskridge, who seems like he could be a candidate for this, and he's going off as the wide receiver 74. This is all according to DLF's ADP. Or maybe there's somebody else. Scott, who do you think might be a sleeper on this team if there is going to be one?
I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny on this team. There's a player that very well could be a sleeper or a bust in Tyler Lockett. Where he's going right now, there is so much attention that's been given to last year, how, it was just a couple huge games. Forget for a minute that, well, ask yourself the question: if that's the worst case scenario, is one player winning you 3 games in a fantasy season worth it to have mediocre play the rest of it? Maybe,
especially at that low of a cost.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Tyler Lockett, where he's being drafted, technically fits, I guess, the definition of a sleeper, or at least a value. It was a little fluky, I think, how under-involved he was last year. It was not like that the year before. Up until last year, he was a little bit boom busty, but nothing like last year. And now he's just this epitome of boom bust all of a sudden because of one season. So, and the Seahawks are smart. They know that they're successful when he's involved. You know what I mean? They know he's going to have to be involved for DK to be successful. So I think he could easily be a value where he's currently going in drafts. I've seen it on Twitter all off season, mostly sell Tyler Lockett, all that kind of stuff. And maybe it's a little bit of homerism in me. Maybe it's that play in that Minnesota playoff game that he had. I don't know what it is, but I think he could be a value. But then, like I said, at the same time, if last year is kind of the trend, if he is now kind of in that boom bust mode, then he potentially could even be a bust at his current ADP. It's kind of a unique situation for a player.
Yeah, and boom bust is so interesting for him because he had some really high highs, and he had during the fantasy season, if you just look at the regular season, he had 4 games out of those first 14 or 13 that weren't double-digit PPR points. He at least for the most part was putting up fairly decent totals and was getting 8-9 targets a game. Now he did have a game that it was 20 targets and scored 53 points, and that was some really high highs.
That Cardinals game.
But I think a lot of it was he just didn't score touchdowns in the other games, right? It wasn't that he wasn't utilizing the offense at all. It's just that he had trouble finding the end zone. So I don't know. I'm kind of a Tyler Lockett apologist myself. I feel like, he came out. I really liked him a lot, and he did really well. And he's been a little safer the last couple of years. Whereas, like you said, last year was just kind of a year where he kind of got that boomer bust label. But Russ, what do you think? Who might be a sleeper or being undervalued in drafts?
Well, he stole my answer because Tyler Lockett is kind of the only real answer because we're pushing him down because we believe in DK Metcalf. Mm-hmm. And you can do both. On this team last year, the way they played the game, the way they split, the way they passed, like you said, they both got 120-something targets. They were extremely close. And yeah, like you said, maybe he won't score all of his touchdowns in one game next year. The fluke of flukes was that freaking Cardinals game where for some reason Patrick Peterson remembered how to play cornerback and just shut down DK Metcalf. But that's not what we're here to complain about. But it's very true. Even if they, like I said before, even if they do treat DK as the X, as the dude, as the guy, that's still going to leave at least 100 targets, even if, because let's put a little more to the slot, a few more to the running backs. You're still around 100, 115 targets to lock it. And man, remember what was that 2-3 seasons ago where Russell Wilson literally had a perfect passer rating to Tyler Lockett? And it wasn't because there wasn't a lot of passes. They have a thing. They are that good together. So you're right. He is absolutely getting written off. Once you realize that he's 28 and the fact that he's now the number 2 on a team that runs the ball too much, like seriously, you're in a league where someone else has Tyler Lockett, just say everything I just said and you can get him for a late second and he will be the smoothest wide receiver 3 with a wide receiver 1 week upside on your roster, and assuming you start at least 10 players, he will be a wonderful last flex spot for you every single week.
Yeah, and I mean, just to add to that, it's important to look at the context of the season too. I mean, from about week 9 on, I'm looking at it right now, Russell Wilson never had more than 23 completions in a game from week 9 on. He had significantly more than that on average before week 9. Yep. So to me, it's a little bit similar to, I'm not ready to just completely jump ship on all the Philadelphia Eagles skill players because of last year, because the offense was just dysfunctional. So I don't necessarily think that it's not a good thing, but it's not just a death knell. Like Jalen Reagor, for instance, like I'm not saying he's going to come to his potential and be a wide receiver 1. I'm not going to jump ship on a guy that got hurt as a rookie and then was part of that dumpster fire. I'm not calling the Seahawks a dumpster fire. I'm just saying the offense really kind of started spinning in place the second half of the season, and Tyler Lockett's production went with it. So I just think that's important to look at. If there's other things besides it's just like, oh, Tyler's washed, or, he's just boom bust, he's not worth it. Like, but it's turning into him being a great value in drafts.
Yeah, I love that. What about the other side? If there's somebody that maybe we're overvaluing, I don't like
Tyler.
Well, I almost feel like the only possible answers are DK or Russ, and I don't know that we're like. Do you think either one of those fit that bill, Russ Fisher?
Yeah, they could all happen. I mean, let's be honest. It's a new offense, and they haven't done anything exciting in. Seriously though, when did Russ Wilson start? 13-ish? Like
2012.
12? Yeah. My days don't matter in my brain anymore. They've all melted together. Like they've never had an exciting offense from the very beginning. So there's gonna be growing pains if this is a real offense. Like if we're splitting running backs out, if we have 3 viable wide receivers and a tight end that could get. Like there's going to be growing pains in this, and that's assuming they catch on as the season goes on. And that defense, the defensive line is probably, and Bobby Wagner are the only strengths. Like their secondary is very worrisome, so like they can get caught in very strange situations that they've never really got caught in before, on top of a new offense, on top of a couple of new players. It can go poorly. I don't think it will. Don't get me wrong. I have faith in Russ Wilson as a quarterback and his mind and arm, and Pete Carroll, that if it starts going bad, they don't care if they're down by 30. They're just going to start running the ball all the time. So like, I don't think like it can get that bad, but I just think the ceiling could be a lot lower than we want it to be, or we hope it will be. And that's honestly what scares me about DK, because yeah, he's like Odell Beckham in 14, 15, like when he was healthy. He didn't need 12 targets, but it was great that he got him because he could take any slant route to the house at any given time. DK Metcalf can take any ball that was dropped 18 yards backwards to the house at any time because that's how big and fast he is. But you don't want to bank on him getting lucky, right? Like you want the place to be there. You want the organization to be there. I hope it is, but I will be very skeptical for a while.
Got to be so much fun to watch DK Metcalf play, right? I mean, it's just watching that guy line up on the field, watching him
sort of do this a lot.
Yeah,
of course DK can do that.
Well, and I mean, the great thing about DK too is before he came along, they just had not had that alpha. Like
literally
I
ever.
Remember the last time they had that alpha?
Jerry Rice? I don't know, man.
yeah. Jerry Rice at 45 years old.
I was trying to think if he's the best Seahawk receiver ever. I mean, like, or how many years he would have to put in to be like the best ever.
I mean,
Baldwin has so many receptions that it'll take a while to catch up to that one.
Yeah, and I mean, you got the old school Steve Largent days. I mean, I think he easily could be. It's just hard to it's hard to
taking
it's hard to
4
talk
years,
about this
5
early.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he can keep up the speed with yards, at least he'll probably catch up to that quick.
Yeah, I mean, I agree too. It's, I mean, honestly, the sleeper bust conversation with Seahawks is kind of boring because there isn't really any good candidates. I mean, if I'm going to go with the bust, it would have to be either Russell or DK, probably DK, and that's only just because he's starting at such a high point that it's just there's less margin for error for him to meet that ADP. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
I think it's much easier for him to come in under that, than to come in above it, obviously, because that's the upper echelon if you're talking above where he's going now. But I just think, him and Russell, just because they're already fairly high up there, that just in the definition of what a bust is, they're the most likely. But this just doesn't have a team that screams like, hey, let's everybody, who's your busts? And
right,
there's really not any Seahawks for that one, like,
yep.
Maybe that's a good thing.
So despite the struggles, Russ, we've got the team went 12-4 last year. It's not like they were, it feels frustrating, but the team was actually like pretty good. We had a 17-game season now in 2021 after 12-4 last year. Where does this team go next year?
It's so infuriating that they do that well, right? Like, they look like such trash sometimes, yet they still end up like Russell Wilson is good for 8 wins on his own. Like, he doesn't even need an offensive line because there's barely one anyway. Just give them 5-6 guys and call it a day, or 7-on-7s, I guess they are, right? But it's so just not good. The problem is their division has gotten much better than they have. Well, hold on. Every other team has improved this year more than the Seahawks have improved. Let me word that.
The gap has
worded
shrunk.
Much better.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot. Like, it was wonderful that you could always used to go, oh, well, I mean, the Rams always found a way to beat the Seahawks at least once, no matter how much Jeff Fisher wanted them to be mediocre. The Niners were terrible, so we can count those wins. Like, no, every division game is going to be a challenge. And it's the offenses that are now in this division, like, especially if Lance walks in pretty quickly, like what that offense can turn into. I don't think the Seahawks have a defense to stop that. So there's a very good chance, not that they go, like 0-6, but like not far off. And that's just in the division, so I mean, I can't say they're still going to end up with like 8 or 9 wins without trying. Just somehow magically they're going to slip and fall into the end zone and the other team will just forfeit or something. That's just the luck of the Seahawks, or the refs will just give them a couple of games. But it's like 9 wins. Like, what is that, like 9-8 now? Is that what math is trying to help me with that I can't think of? So yeah, something like that. Very mediocre, just because it's going to be different. It's going to be new. And I have zero faith in that defense helping them out much during the season.
Scott, the good news is that the AFC South is the opponents for the AFC. I mean, that's kind of a pretty easy draw. It looks like right now, at least, starting off with the Colts in week 1.
Their first game at Indianapolis looks a little bit better than it did.
Oh, yeah.
That it did. Right. Right.
No,
but that
so
extra game is against Pittsburgh. So.
I'm a little bit more optimistic, I guess. I have 11-7. I have them, and this is pretty much just what I do every year at this point. The Niners and the Rams, I have them splitting the season series with them. I have the home teams winning those. Home field advantage will be back, hopefully, for the Seahawks this year, and I think that does go a long way. So I have them splitting those in division. Right now, I have them beating the Cardinals twice, but that could be a little optimistic. But I mean, you're right. They get to play the Colts. They get to play the Jaguars. They get to play the Texans, and they also get to play the Lions. So they've got some. I mean, you can never just chalk up a win in the NFL, but you can be pretty confident about certain weeks that are going to be wins. So I mean, some of the linchpin games for me, week two versus Tennessee, I think that's going to be a great game. I have the Seahawks losing it, but that's a pivotal game. I have them beating Pittsburgh. That might be a little optimistic at Pittsburgh, but let's see what else. I have them losing at Green Bay. I have them losing to Chicago late in the season because I think Fields will be the guy. And you're right. I mean, the division has gotten better. I mean, at least early in the season, the quarterback situation is the only real question in San Francisco. I mean, their defense is kind of back to where it needs to be, and they've got a great offense. They've got great offensive weapons. So, I'm just kind of hoping don't put Lance in until after our first game with you.
Yeah.
Wait till that. Yeah.
And I mean, I would say the Rams are the favorite in the division at this point. I mean, they lost Akers, but I mean, they still, with bringing Stafford in and that defense, I think they have to be the favorite. Cardinals are just a little bit of an enigma to me. I mean, I love Kyler Murray. I love watching him play. I just don't know how good they're actually going to be this year. So, I see the Seahawks potentially contending for the division title. If not a wild card, all the way to third place in that kind of range within the division.
Great info as always, guys. That does it for us in the Seahawks. And I mentioned the out-of-conference record there, the out-of-conference schedule, at least, who they were going to play, because just so happens that Colts team that you guys will line up against in week 1 is exactly who I'm talking about next, right after this. So I'm going to get over to that.
I miss Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck. Come back, Andrew.
Oh, yes, please come back, Andrew Luck, please.
Good timing to have that conversation for sure. So I look for Scott, for Russ. I'm at Calvin and Hobby. Make sure you're following all of those guys. Make sure you're following at DL Football, and just look down below and make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hit the subscribe button if you're not already. Hit the thumbs up. Make sure you like it. Give us a good comment. That helps the algorithm and all that good stuff. Or at least that's what I'm told by smart people like Russ. So if you will just give me, go ahead and do that. That'd be great. Show some support. So for these guys, for Dynasty League Football, I'm Calvin and Hobby, and we will see you